Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. First, I don't want to get misty-eyed, but so proud and honored, truly, not just saying this, but proud and honored to have Rebecca serve as president over this last year, especially during this weird year. But she's awesome. And I'm so glad to still have her presence and voice in the upcoming years. So I would like to just do real quickly, if you will, snaps and claps for Rebecca. Thank you so much. So as Rebecca shared today, we have a great panel today, and we're talking about cyber hygiene. And so, here's the thing. First of all, let me demystify cybersecurity before we get started, because I think of it as, when people hear cybersecurity, they think of it as something out of a Tom Clancy novel. It's very shadowy and Department of Defense oriented. But let me give you a definition. So according to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency for the US, cybersecurity is the art, which I've never heard that term quite used before, but the art of protecting networks, devices, and data from unauthorized access or criminal use, and the practice of ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. So if that didn't clear it up, essentially, cybersecurity is protecting those things that keep our data, right? And then these days, it encompasses everything from computers and the internet, entertainment, video games, social media, transportation, meat, all right, meat, fuel, which we're going to talk more about that, shopping, and even medicine, right? Because think about this, if any of you watched Law and Order, Organized Crime. Okay, so I'm just going to preface by saying sometimes it's not really how the law works. As an attorney, I can tell you, you never go objection without grounds, right? But it is art imitating life. And what you see in that, if you've watched that, is the stealing, the hijacking of COVID vaccines. That is still cybersecurity. So it impacts all areas and all sectors of life. So now that we're thinking about cybersecurity, we understand what that is. Let's talk about hygiene, right? So, you get up in the morning and you brush your teeth because you want to prevent root canals, which those are never fun, and halitosis, and you bathe regularly and wash your hair, and especially now more than ever, washing and sanitizing your hands. And every day we engage in these behaviors, these routines to maintain and improve our hygiene, right? So think about cyber hygiene in the same lens. Cyber hygiene is the routine and the practice of training yourself to think proactively about cybersecurity. As the same as you do with that teeth brushing and the hair washing, and you do this to resist cyber threats and online security issues. So that's cyber hygiene. So think about it that way. When you hear cyber hygiene, you don't have to think about it as, oh, it's something I don't have to worry about. It's something my IT department worries about or Comcast worries about. No, it's something you have to worry about. So why is cyber hygiene important? So here are a few data points for you to consider. And we're going to get more into detail, but just lean in and listen to this. The median cost of a breach is $21,659. Okay. I just don't have that laying around here on my desk right now. If I did, I wouldn't allow you to see it because I practice good cyber hygiene and you can't see the things on my desk, right? 80% of breach impacts result in cost of $2,038 to $194,000. 95% of impacts are from 826 to 653, 587,000. In 2019 and 2020, malware increased 358% overall, and ransomware by 435%. Okay, I want you to take that in for a minute. We're going to get into this conversation, but think about that. The world faces over 100,000 malicious websites and 10,000 malicious files daily, right? That's crazy. Phishing attacks account for more than 80% of reported security incidents. Phishing attacks, opening an email, and I have something to share with you later that's just going to make you go, whoa. All right. Google has registered over 2 million phishing sites as of January 2021, and this is up from 1.7 million in January 2020, which basically equates to 27% increase in 12 months. Okay. Wow. Listen to that. In 2019, 93.6% of observed malware was polymorphic. Okay, there's a good term, right? I love that. Meaning it has the ability, excuse me, to continually change its code to evade detection. Now that is pretty scary. 94% of malware is delivered via our favorite thing to use, email. Cyber attackers sought to profit from the unprecedented challenges brought on by the pandemic, and they disrupted COVID-19 efforts and critical supply chain attacks, which grew 420% in 12 months. And finally, deepfakes and disinformation will become even more major threats in the future. So thinking about that data, I know maybe it's freaking you out a little bit, and I hope it kind of does. I think that, you know, we see things shared on LinkedIn and in other channels, and I think we kind of think, oh, well, that's not my problem to think about. All of my co-moderator, Ben Phillips, today, and all of our panelists, I am telling you what, they are sweating this. And they are sweating this for us. And they're going to help us understand why we need to sweat this to protect our data, our family, our neighbors, and our country. So we're going to learn from them what keeps them up at night, what you can do to improve your cyber hygiene, why and how those personal practices are important to your work cyber hygiene, and what we can do as organizations and leaders. So as Rebecca already shared, we have this distinguished panel. First, and I'm going to do this quickly so we can just lean right into this awesome conversation. First, and I'm going to go my Hollywood squares, Meredith Harper, who is the VP and Chief Information Security Officer at Lilly. Welcome, Meredith. And I'm telling you, she is sweating some things right now. Probably always, right, Meredith? Next, Shatrice Mosley Romero. Shatrice is the Cybersecurity Program Director at the Indiana Office of Technology and the Indiana Department of Homeland Security. Thank you, Shatrice, for being here. She's sweating some things too, and sometimes I can hear her voice in the background. When I use Alexa, I can just hear her admonishing me.
Very true.
And finally, we have Nicole Sigler, who is the cybersecurity consultant at Ponderance Local Cyber Company. If you have not heard of them, you need to go to their website right now and check them out. Well, not right now. First, just listen. And then my co-moderator is Ben Phillips, who is the director at Cat Sapper Miller as assurance leader, delivering the cybersecurity reports, IT auditing, consulting, cybersecurity, and financial statement audits. So really intense stuff. So with that, first of all, what I will do is please put your questions in the Q&A, and we'll be watching for those. And also what I'll ask our panelists to do is please share your LinkedIn profile in the chat so people can follow you and keep up on that important cybersecurity information. So with this, first, we're going to kick off this session and we're going to talk about work and corporate, and that's going to be facilitated by our Jedi, Ben Phillips. So Ben, I hand the mic to you, sir, to kick off this conversation.
Thank you, Linda. Appreciate that. And hello, everyone. Happy to be here. So I think, really on the corporate side, we have a few questions that are really geared towards you. And thank you so much to the panelists that are going to be here helping with us today. So the first question I have for you all is, ripped from the headlines, many of us have heard of the U.S. fuel pipeline attack, the ransomware attacks on various meat plants around the country, SolarWinds attack. So if you could please share with our audience, what these recent attacks mean, for you as professionals in the industry, as for individuals just living our daily life in the U.S., right? And what they really mean to our panelists that might not live, in our world, right? So I think we'll start with you, Meredith. How about that? And I have a shirt that says "You're on mute," but I'm not wearing it right now. It's okay. While Meredith is going to figure out her sound.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, we can hear you now.
Okay, all right. Don't know exactly what's going on there. This is the gremlins, okay? I'm dating myself a little bit. So thank you so much for having me today. And what this means for me, and I'm not going to get into the gory details of each one of the attacks and what happened. I mean, we can talk about that forever. But in a nutshell, what this means for me is that the attackers are looking at things that we rely on every day. So we have 16 critical infrastructures across the US. And that's everything from healthcare to agriculture to energy. I mean, these are things that we rely on in order for us to function as a company, as a country. And so I'm watching the attackers start to say, how do we create the most havoc? How do we look at these critical infrastructures and see how we can disrupt not only the US economy, but also the everyday life of Americans, and even in some instances globally, because some of these companies are global. And so that's what it means for me, that I have to always stay on my P's and Q's. Healthcare is one of the critical infrastructures, which means that we are attractive to individuals who want to wreak havoc in our spaces. So that's one thing. The other part is it goes back to a premise of what we've talked about in the security industry around trust but verify. And in a lot of these instances, I'm looking at us trusting certain technology in SolarWinds. We have certain applications that we're used to leveraging to update software, and we trust it. We trust that it's going to be accurate. It's going to be, viable. It's going to be good code that's going to be pushed into our environment, so we're going to stay up to date. Well, I'm at a point now where I'm saying I can't trust anything. I can't trust that application won't be hijacked like it was in the SolarWinds incident. I can't trust that we might have an exposure because of a connection to a third party that might be a little bit lax on their security posture. We have a direct connection, not at Lilly, but people have direct connections to these third parties, and then they now have an entry point into your network environment. So I am at a point where I'm saying, yes, we have a very large ecosystem. We have these critical infrastructures that we all have to manage, and we have to be more diligent at paying attention to the fact that everything doesn't look like what we think it looks like on face value. And we have to challenge and question everything and verify 3, 4, 5 times before we get ourselves into a pickle and then end up in a situation like with, JBS and as well as Colonial, where ransom is involved and then money is involved. And then, we get into a whole situation there. So for me, it just means that we have to be more diligent. They're going after the big things now for us that can cripple us as a country.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Meredith. And maybe next we'll go to Nicole to get your opinion on maybe what this means, maybe more from a consultant's perspective, one that serves the industry, from a consulting perspective.
Yeah. So thank you for having me. This actually caused a lot of havoc in our world. There were, several clients. We do network monitoring. There were several clients that use SolarWinds, and we had to help them make sure that they got the vulnerabilities fixed. Did it apply to them? Did it not? And it was troublesome for some companies, and some of them had to take SolarWinds down before they could even determine. So it disrupted business. So, you talk about how it impacts the businesses, but it trickles down. It impacts us as just consumers. Our gas prices increased. You know, there was companies that lost revenue. So it continued to trickle down. And just like Meredith said, that trust but verify has become key. And that's something we always say as consultants and auditors is, I believe you got it in place, trust you, just need to verify. And you need to kind of use that as well in your own daily life and in your own company, and just double check things. And it's just like any other organization where you have checks and balances, you just want to double check and make sure that you are implementing those checks so you don't cause the havoc or have to take down systems and those kind of things.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate that. And last, how about not last but not least, right? Let's hear from you, Shatrice.
Yeah, I think I love the whole, the aspect of verifying. I'm much with Meredith on that. My common theme and discussion is never trust and always verify. And that is just the way that this world has just kind of progressed into it. Frankly, if it looks too good and too easy, then always never trust that. Nicole's right on tap with these kind of ripped from the headlines, the pipeline, SolarWinds. I think what we heard in that, at least from my perspective at the state, is that this is going to, those things affected not only the Department of Defense. I mean, SolarWinds took down NASA. I mean, that it was not just some financial institutions or some universities. I mean, it took down the backbone, and it got into the backbone of our most critical infrastructure in our Department of Defense. I mean, the Pentagon. I mean, the list of names was Microsoft. It was so scary that SolarWinds within so many hours took down their page of people that were attacked, because it really just, of course, nothing's ever really deleted, right? So people had already done screenshots and things like that. But I think that was a eye opener. And if anybody is really interested on how you hear the SolarWinds, and that was most certainly in the news, but 60 Minutes did a great piece on SolarWinds. And that was just the tip of the iceberg a few weeks out. We've only found out since then that it's worse than what we thought. And we knew that was going to be the case, but it was still unraveling on that. I mean, it was breaking the infrastructure and getting into the infrastructure, covering your steps. And the way I kind of, I'm an analogy person, because I really feel for me in cybersecurity, and to Linda's great point, demystifying cyber, right, is to really how do we make it make sense for us? So SolarWinds was basically this. It was the CEO of the company inviting somebody that's it's cool, he's with me, he already has the background check, he's all good and everything, he has access to everything, it's fine, he has a little badge, he's with me. So nobody questioned it, everybody approved it. And then what happened was he left the CEO and got into the bank, got into the safe, got into how things were running, got into the operations room, and then made sure no one knew that he got into those things. And then when the CEO found out he's not somebody we can trust, we didn't know where the person went, right? And now we're well, we don't even know what they touched. And we can't know what they touched until something breaks. That's how scary SolarWinds was too. I think for me, I'm always with IT people, I'm okay, break it down normal for me. What does it really mean? How bad is this? When you say it's into these very technical systems, okay, that I hear you, but I don't know what that really means to the normal person. And so I think when you think of the physical of a CEO letting a thief in and letting somebody who has complete ill intent from a nation state into your organization, a spy, if you will, right? That perks people's ears up. They're holy crap, we don't want people like that in NASA or in our Department of Defense or in our major bank industries or our major loan industries. And so, to Nicole's point, the trickle down effect is powerful. And, in Indiana, we still saw an increase in gas prices, nothing compared to some of the other people who had significant gas prices, and people who were threatening people at the gas station because they didn't have enough gas and they were freaking out. Everything socially and between people starts breaking down real fast when you take away survival, when you take away taking care of yourself and your safety. So I think the big thing that we hear on the rip from the headlines and these really scary things that's happened just in the last like 12 months, aside from just this pandemic thing that everybody's talking about, is that we've just been attacked one after another on the cybersecurity front. And I think it's become more real for people, that it really is something that, like, we're going to see prices in meat go up. We're going to see, the fallout from the Colonial Pipeline and the critical infrastructure requirements, which means rates are going to go up for infrastructure increase, and the economic effect will most certainly be felt for a long time. So yeah, I don't sleep at all.
And I think it's just going to continue to get worse. I mean, I hate to say it, but we are only touching the beginning of this, of how aggressive this is going to be against our industry. So it's only going to get worse.
Well, that's positive. Just kidding. No, but I mean, it's great. We have, it's created a huge industry for people helping others, right? And just being more cyber aware, which is, one of the purposes of this panel, right? People donating their time to really share their knowledge with those, in business that need to know about it, but also, on the personal side, right? So that's great. I'll ramble forever. So I'm going to go to the next question. The next question I have kind of digs into a little bit of, we last talked about like all these different cyber attacks and we named them, but now we're going to hit ransomware. And ransomware is something that you've all probably heard in the news in a headline, this hits ransomware, whatever. I'm not going to waste my breath speaking to this. I'm going to let the experts do it, that live in the field. But so we always hear it in the news. Maybe we'll start with Shatrice, but you can explain to us, how does ransomware, work, right? And I know you're going to explain it, in simple terms, because that's what you do. Hopefully you use an analogy. How does it work? What are the critical preventive measures, a company can take to reduce the risk of having to pay the bad actors? And we'll see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, I mean, the scary part of ransomware is that it really can take down things. That's exactly what happened with Colonial Pipeline. It was ransomware. They started seeing it. They started shutting things down to start segmenting things, and then before you know it, the whole was a 555, more than 1,000. I can't remember. It's a lot of pipeline that developed that kind of affected the whole East Coast, right? So, I mean, the basics of ransomware is that, much like children in those terrible situations, they take something away from you, and in order for you to get it back, they require payment. It's that simple. Except in cyber, they shut things down. Now, if you think of your business, for everyone online, what is the critical thing that you can't make money, you can't communicate with people, you don't know where critical, proprietary information is or confidential information is, because it's all locked up. So that anxiety, basically, I always kind of think about the anxiety when you think you lost your phone. So multiply that times 100, and that's what ransomware is. So, because I know I can relate to, like, oh my God, where's my phone? Where did I leave it? And you have this like moment of panic. So that's what people do, but then they feel that for days, if not weeks, if not months, because they don't know where anything is, right? And so it's a true violation at a personal level, because this is your workstation, it's your company, but at the same time, it's something that I think from a preventive component of it, it really is all about preparing, backing up, preparing, know how you're gonna handle it, because it is become one of the greatest ways that people are making money, and it's not going to stop. Bad actors have this to a T. We heard it with the Colonial Pipeline on how crazy that was, but it wasn't new. Years ago, when ransomware started really taking on, they have call centers, they have references, so they're like, hey, I'm shutting your stuff down, but listen, I really will give you your stuff if you pay me. I will give you the contact information, the last 3 people I ransomed, so they can tell you when they paid me, I gave them back their stuff and all was good and we'll leave you alone, right? I mean, so they have a true business plan. They're not like just, I like Linda's component, like somebody in someone's basement, all dark and gloomy. This is a call center in the middle of, in America, in nation states, that they come into work between, 12-hour shifts. This is a true business that is lucrative, and is not going to stop. And so the best thing we can do in this situation is prepare for if that and when that happens to you. Who do you call? Where are your backups? Where are your assets? What test those exercises, test the plan of everything shutting down. So if you can't communicate, how are you communicating around your system? And just be aware of the different types of things that are out there. So, getting to information sharing sites like multi-state information sharing analysis center, right? So the ISACs that you'll hear, right? I mean, learn about what new threats are out there because it's consistently evolving so that you can go back to your IT person and say, hey, are we good here? Or, hey, we're using this vendor okay, that's great. That's fine. You're using a vendor, but go ask your vendor, hey, are we good here? Because I hear this is a thing that's attacking our industry. Is this something that has already been closed up? Have you closed that door that they're going to be knocking on to get in? And so that's kind of really the best thing you can do is be educated, prevent, back up, plan, exercise those plans, because at the end of the day, the communication piece is going to be key and knowing what you have. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Shatrice. I really like the lost your cell phone analogy. I usually have client when I explain it, sometimes it's for me, I lost my keys, right? Or I locked my keys in my car. I don't know where they are. So what do you do when how do you make sure you can get back in your car? Have an extra set of keys and make sure those extra set of keys aren't in your car, right? So that's just perfect.
I love that.
I think one other point that we can make here is just how lucrative this really is. So if we look at a couple of the last more high profile ransomware attacks, I mean, if I was a bad guy, I mean, I guess I must be in the wrong industry. If I was a bad guy, this would be great work. But we're talking millions of dollars. This is not a ransom where I paid $500 and they gave me back my keys to the kingdom. We're talking millions, tens of millions of dollars that's being made. So this is a lucrative business for folks, which makes it attractive, again, for them to go after, especially those areas where they think that we're not making the most major investment in our technical controls. But I want to talk about another piece to this is that, because I know we use the word cyber and most CISOs, we really hate the word cyber, honestly, because our world is much bigger than just cyber. Cyber is a part of what I do from an information security perspective, but there's process that also can open yourself up to things. You talked specifically, Shatrice, about assets, knowing your assets. That's not a technical issue. That is a process issue. Do you know where all of your critical crown jewels are and how you are going to survive if you no longer have the crown jewels? Like, what do you do? Do you go fully paper? How long can you last fully paper? Who can you pay? Like, so all of those things. So I think it's a little bit beyond just the technical capabilities, because in some of these instances, and I think back to one of the first ransomware attacks that we saw in the industry, they were down for, it was a hospital system out of California. They were down for 11 days. They had no technical capability. So all of the backups did not help because they had no technical capability. And after a while, they had to start thinking about what is the process that we have to go through in order for us to now transport our critical patients to another hospital. That, again, is not a technical solution. That is a process that you have to have in place. So I think you have to think a little bit beyond some of the other great ideas that Shatrice shared with you in terms of how do you get beyond it and get through it. But it's a process, people issue, training, awareness of people knowing what to do when it happens, and then the technology solutions that layer on top of that.
Yeah, thanks, Meredith. Yeah, that reminded me of one time, like 2 years ago, I had a client that got hit with ransomware, and they ended up paying it. And then it was really weird because afterwards, the bad actor asked them for like a review to make sure that they actually like, hey, we're one of the good ones. We actually give you your keys back. And I was like, oh my gosh, So it is a business, and the business doesn't work unless they get paid. Right. So it's really a back end sales tactic of that, let's get that money and let's keep people, try and be on the good side of the bad side. It's like a wrong coin to be on.
Can I add one more thing about the FBI? I see that someone put in here. question around if it's a business, can't the FBI shut it down or shut down these centers? You know, a lot of them are operating in what I consider to be the vapor environment. They're not always physical centers where they can locate them and actually shut them down, but they may have a network of customer service reps that are working around the world to actually support this particular entity. But one of the things I did want to bring to light, if you have had the pleasure of having a conversation, and hopefully we have no FBI agents on the call, but if you have had the pleasure of having a discussion with the FBI around the idea of to pay or not to pay, FBI is going to take the stance. We don't negotiate with terrorists. We don't pay ransoms. We don't. And I have clashed with the FBI for years over this, because especially me working in the healthcare space, sometimes not paying is a life or death situation for us. Someone could die if we don't do what we need to do to get our systems back online. So what my encouragement has been to folks is this is an organizational decision that you have to make. You have to look at your risk posture, your risk tolerance, what's going to be impacted, and you make a good organizational decision. And unfortunately, and fortunately for some, sometimes that means paying is the best thing for you to do. So again, I'm not saying don't follow what the FBI is saying, but I want you to use your judgment. You know your industry, you know your organization. Use your judgment when you have to get to the point where you feel like you need to pay.
And Meredith, I completely agree with that. We've dealt with this with several different customers, and Hancock has been one that, you know, it's been in the news. They have, you know, worked very closely with us, and we did the kind of risk-based thing. What was better to wait or to pay it and move forward? And kind of like you said, it was going to be days before you can get up. I mean, sometimes it's 5 days before you can even get things back up and running. So we kind of use that guidance of, we're not taking the stance from a company perspective of telling you not to pay. We're not telling you to pay, but it's exactly what you said. Take a look at that and look at your risk posture. And we've actually worked with several and helped them pay, make sure that they have, you know, Bitcoin in their back, you know, they've bought Bitcoin. They have, some of these have it already so that they're ready if this happens. So it's been interesting. I will tell you, we've had success when we've paid, we've gotten data back. So just kind of like you said, they're in this for business, Ben. Like you said, they want, you know, they want good reviews, basically. And we've been, you know, been fortunate with that. And we actually work with the FBI a lot as well, and given them information. And we've been able to help them make some arrests in foreign countries with that. So they've been cooperative with us, and we've been able to, it's hard. Sometimes it's really hard to track these down, but we have been able to at least get data and continuing. Sometimes this may be the 4th or 5th one that they've seen, and we're just able to give them more data so they can, you know, come up with a good conclusion. So I think from the ransomware standpoint, from a few words, I guess, of advice, make sure you have a consultant or a retainer on standby. You know, you can sign a contract with a company, make sure they're there so that when you have an issue, you can call them. Go to our website. If you ever have an issue, we have a hotline number that you can call in and we can help. But make sure you have the retainer, and make sure you have cyber insurance. From a company perspective, those are very, very important. And cyber insurance is becoming, I mean, the norm now. And there are certain companies that if you have to qualify to get it, right? It's a pretty intensive questionnaire to fill out, so it takes some time. But it's you know, you have to do phishing tests. You have to have certain things in place. So it's not a quick process. So if you don't have it, start that process now to get it. The other thing, I think some of the things from a business standpoint, you know, we didn't, not to get too technical, but the biggest thing is making sure you have a good endpoint detection, making sure you have some network monitoring, make sure you have training, you know, just like you talked, it's not just technical, it's people. Make sure you have the training, make sure you're doing those phishing tests. I think we're going to talk a little bit later, but phishing is on the rise, and especially with COVID and everything. And so doing the phishing tests, doing the training to educate your users, because users most of the time, our own internal users, that can cause us to have these malware issues and things like that.
Awesome. Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate that. You know, our last question on the corporate side will hit. It'll probably be a little, you know, pretty vague, but maybe the panelists, you guys can all help the audience understand, you know, from a corporate perspective, you know, what do you see as the top cyber risks or top things companies, you know, small businesses, big businesses, small agencies, big agencies should be doing, but then also maybe ducktail into, you know, it always just isn't the top. It's not always the CISO. It's you know, how are these organizations helping their employees, you know, be more cyber smart as it relates to protecting their data? So maybe you could go into that answer, and I think I'll probably start with. I'll leave it up. So we'll probably start with Nicole. But the one thing I do want to say before that, she said, Nicole, you said cyber insurance. The one thing I would say is, if you don't have cyber insurance, and I'm not going to tell you an insurance agent to do it, but when you're procuring that, make sure you ask for retroactive coverage, because the average, that's something they won't tell you, but it's a possibility, because the average breach, I think per IBM in 2020, was in your system 228 days before they identified it. So retroactive coverage means a year ago you're good, right? So ask for that. It's a big thing for cyber insurance coverage. But with that, yeah, Nicole, if you could start out that last question of talking about just cyber risks and kind of what companies are doing to help, you know, their employees be more cyber smart.
So, as I kind of just mentioned, phishing and malware are the top two, and that can go from social engineering. It can go from phone calls. I mean, and we talk about the company perspective, but this is reality for all of us as individuals as well. My grandparents are getting 15 calls a day from Amazon because they tell them that they have a credit and they need to get their information. They don't even have an Amazon account. So it's coming through phone calls, it's coming through emails, it's coming through texts. And I've seen this in a couple of our clients. They asked to go buy a gift card for the CFO, and they go buy the gift cards and they send them off. And, you know, I mean, it's just, sometimes it's as small and minimal as that. But I think the biggest part is that training of your end users. And there's some good training, like, I don't know if you guys use Know before, but there's some good systems out there like that do fun trainings that are interactive, and you can click things. And so there's actually, and they're quick, they're, 15 minutes or so. So it doesn't have to be a long annual training. You can do a weekly topic and send them these quick trainings, or a monthly topic, and hey, this is in the news. And that'll help with your training. I mean, the social engineering, I think it was Linda or Rebecca, one of them was talking about the social engineering of, you walk into somewhere and it's so easy to say, I'm carrying donuts, can you open the door for me? And you walk right in and you're inside the building, and you can get, easily work your way into the data center. So the biggest thing through those, I think, is the phishing through the different vectors, the social engineering, and then the malware, which I had kind of previously talked about, is making sure, antivirus nowadays is almost obsolete, and you need endpoint protection to catch everything. And there's different monitoring and thing, but the biggest part of that is you got to make sure, trust but verify. You got to have the monitoring controls in place. Don't just say, I got endpoint protection. You got to continuously look at it and monitor it, because if there's things that come up and then you don't patch them, you'll find yourself in the same situation as the pipeline and those kind of things.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I found what has been helpful is trying to do that training and awareness at the point of the failure, right? So it's great when we do things like gamification, which we do at Lilly. Our training is fully gamified, so it's a fun, you're traversing this scene, and you're confronted with different cyber issues, and you have to point and click and do out, like, so we do all of that. But one of the things that I got a chance to do at my previous employer is that we took a look at not only phishing, which you talked about, vishing, which is really using voice to be able to gain access, smishing, which is using our text messaging to be able to gain access, but we also did physical penetration. And that was an eye opener for my executives, because what we did is hired a company and came up with several scenarios of them trying to get into one of our 9 data centers. And unfortunately, they made it into every single one on the raised floor inside the data center, leveraging all types of techniques. And so we realized in that moment that we did not have the right protocols and processes in place, nor did we train people appropriately to be able to spot some of these things that people would do to gain access. So be varied in your approach, test these things out. There's different ways that there can be given access to your organization or those critical places. Phone closets. I mean, we don't think about some of these things. Phone closets where we might have all the wiring for the phones and everything. They made it into all of that stuff. I was shocked, absolutely shocked. But it gave us information to be able to now adjust our posture. So always be in this mode of, once we learn, then we have to adjust and make sure that we're putting the right controls in place, that we won't continue to fall victim to these types of things. Have regular tests. I mean, at Lilly, we test monthly. So we are doing social engineering tests every month. And if there is a failure of that social engineering test, so you get that email in your inbox, you click that link, you're going to get a message that basically says, here's what you did and why it was a problem for us. And you're going to be assigned a module that's going to end up on your learning plan to give you some more insight to what you need to do differently next time. So that training at the point of the failure, I think, makes it more real for people versus saying, just wait until we do the annual training in 7 or 8 months, and then we try to pick up on those concepts. So be creative when it comes to that, because it's needed. This is human behavior that we're dealing with, right? So a lot of this is human behavior. A machine doesn't click on the link, a person does. You know, a machine doesn't give out your IP address because someone called you and told you that they were the help desk and that they needed to do some system maintenance on your computer and we need to have your IP address and other information. A person does that. So I'm going to give it to you. That means we have to make sure that those people who are typically our softer targets, we have to make sure that they're trained and aware of those types of things so they can combat that at the point that it's happening. That would be my encouragement there.
You know, and I love, it's a couple of things. Like I love the component of be creative. You know, Linda had said when you talked about the definition of cybersecurity, and you had pointed out like the art. So just for fun, I looked up just the basic definition of art, and it's so right on point, actually. You know, the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination. And it really, like, when you're talking about social engineering, it's not just a psychological, I mean, that's the core element of it, but it is consistently the bad actors, but that also means the good actors. That also means us have to be consistently creative, consistently imaginative, with different forms of training, different forms of communication, and different forms of understanding the bad actor on the other side as to how they are getting in. Because that, I mean, that, you know, cybersecurity is not a ones and zeros thing. It is a critical, thinking skill. It's a creative skill. It's a psychological skill. And then on top of all of that, it's the ones and zeros. If somebody's not good at those other things, they're not going to be a good cyber actor. They're not going to be a good cyber protector. You know, so one of those things where, you know, I know, and I'm just jumping the gun here, but when you're looking at your employees and you're thinking, you know, how do they relate to this? It has nothing to do with the tech side. You know, to Meredith's point earlier, it's 100% operations. And, you know, a lot of companies are still kind of struggling with pushing the line as to the expectation of their employees to protect the kingdom, if you will. But here's the clean black and white of it. If you have an employee who keeps on leaving the door unlocked when they leave the office, and you told them, hey, you can't leave the door unlocked, people are going to steal our stuff, people can come in here and hurt things, and they do it again, and you're like, hey, I told you, don't leave the door unlocked, you know, and they do it again, what are you going to do to that employee? You're going to fire the employee. And what we're doing in the physical realm to the technical realm is that is what we're allowing. So when people are very, very kind of, yeah, it's just phishing. No, you're letting them into your business. And if somebody's not taking that training seriously, but in fairness to the employees, if the management's not taking the training seriously, to not do it just once a year, but do it every month, do it every week, do engaging things, to Mara's point, be creative in how you're communicating it so that you're also accounting for the different learning styles of your employees and how it's going to click. And then, do carrot and stick approaches just like you do with your employees with everything else. When leadership does that, it will elevate it for the employees. But when leadership just kind of talks about, yeah, it's our annual training refresher. Well, that's kind of similar to the other topics we're hearing, right? Diversity, sexual harassment. Doing it once a year and clicking through is not changing the culture. Having consistent conversations, having consistent narrative about it, being honest about it, being vulnerable about it is what is changing culture. And so that's what we need to do with cyber. We need to change the way that we're handling it at the leadership level, and then the employees will come, to that point.
One of the things that shifts culture quicker than anything is just also talking about the failures or the corrective measures that have had to be taken in instances where an employee continuously failed at something.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I've used previously in another role was we would talk about, here's the scenario that happened. Here's the corrective measures that were put in place. And in some of those instances, especially working in the space of healthcare, you access a record that you don't have a patient relationship that needs to be a reason why you're accessing, you're terminated. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so we will communicate that to people to say, this is the behavior. If you do this behavior, here's what we will do. And we will show you examples. Now, of course, we will protect the privacy of the employee and all of that, but hearing those stories, because what I've found, if one person in a department is doing this, 9 times out of 10, that is a pervasive behavior that you see across the entire department. So sharing with them what those consequence models could be, I think also shifts culture very quickly. And then also, I noticed a really interesting phenomenon when I worked for a health system. We had some physicians that had some failures and created some breach situations for us because of those failures. And those individuals became the staunchest advocates of what we were doing in our space. So I leveraged their voices, and they could tell personal stories to people of, here's what I did. I left my office door open because I wanted my secretary to get peanuts out of my office on her lunch break. And I left my computer sitting on my desk. It was next to a busy hallway. Somebody walked in, snatched the computer, and now we are in a breach situation. That is a real live example of what happened in my previous employer. But he would talk about that with his colleagues, and because his colleagues trusted him, they were like, oh, well, if it can happen to him, and he's so diligent about things, then it could possibly happen to me as well. So leverage those voices. Everybody knows whose voice gets answered in your organization. Everybody does. And there's those voices out there that everybody listens to. If you can solicit those people to talk about this on your behalf, I think that will also help shift the culture, especially in those protected and sensitive relationships where people trust each other.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Meredith. And Shatrice, I think you said something about, it's not just technical stuff, it's process and people, right? And I remember, I'm just like living back the glory days from when we had doing a penetration test for a big old bank. We had like a 24-year-old young lady that dressed up like a bank employee, and like at 8 a.m. at the corporate center, bankers show up, right, in operations center, and we found out what the badge looks like, and she just in person, or like people in the Midwest are nice, they'll hold the door open for you, and she just got let right in. So that's, from a physical security breach, that was really easy. And then also like things, people are tricky. Like I'm pretty creative. Like how can I get in somewhere? Like we had one where, an older gentleman and his daughter were going to a health system to go see his wife. The daughter was holding flowers in a balloon. And obviously everyone's like, oh, that's so cute. And then within probably an hour, they were navigating their way physically through the environment and found an open, a data center room with a fan on, right? Because it was hot. And that was as easy as it is. So it's not just like you see a cyber training, like, don't click on stuff. It's also like maintain the physical security of our on-site premises, because honestly, one of the easiest ways is to plug in something if you can do it, right? So,
This is why the move to the cloud for most people is a part of their agenda and their strategy. And they're moving away from data centers because of not only the expense that goes along with it, but there is a risk, increased risk when you actually have physical data centers.
Yeah, 100% agree. So, you know, with that, I think we're gonna call it on the corporate side, and I'm really excited to listen to Linda Calvin, and as she leads us through, you know, on a personal side, you know, what do we need to be thinking about? We all have, you know, I don't want to steal any of her thunder. So, you know, family members, friends, whatever. So, Linda Calvin, back to you.
And thank you. So before I move on, there's a question that came into the chat I've been watching. And anyone, I'll invite this to be open to anyone to answer. So can we briefly talk about how many insurance companies are not covering ransomware? So I think for some people, they didn't know there was even such thing as cybersecurity insurance. And I'll be honest, until 2019, I didn't know there was a cybersecurity insurance company. I did, you know, think about State Farm for, you know, your auto and your bundle that you see on Progressive and all that. So, can you talk about how many insurance companies aren't covering ransomware? Why is that?
So I can give a little bit of insight. I have been entangled in this cyber insurance conundrum since 2011. So with my previous employer, we were an early adopter of cyber insurance policies. I've watched it evolve over the years. And I think to Nicole's point, she said this earlier, I believe, about how complex and how detailed the process is now to just even get approved for a policy or a set of policies. I can't say that in any of my negotiations, Lilly does have cyber insurance. In any of my negotiations, I've never been in a situation where they did not cover ransomware. However, when you're going through that vetting process with the carriers, they are asking, again, not only about your technical environment, but they weigh heavily on your process environment and ask a ton of questions around what is your process? What is your process for how do you assess risk? What is your process for how do you engage with third parties? What is your process? Like, they want to know a lot about the process. And in those instances where I've seen companies not be very strong in process is where they've ended up with policies that have carved out these things like coverage for ransomware. So if you are looking at a comprehensive information security program that, again, is bigger than cyber, 9 times out of 10, you won't be in that boat where they will say, we're a little uncomfortable with your process of how you even respond to a ransomware attack. So therefore, we're going to carve that out of your policy and make that exempt. You won't even be in a boat like that. At least I haven't, because we've been able to really detail out for them how complex our processes are, how we test our processes, the whole nine. Also, in terms of insurance carriers, what I'm noticing now at this stage of the game versus what we saw, 10 years ago when we started getting into this market, is that you are going to have multiple insurers. So you might have, a set of insurers, a tower. So you got your tower of insurance. You might have multiple insurers that will give you certain levels of coverage up to a certain cap. So you're not going to get everything from one insurer is what I'm trying to say. You got to have multiple relationships, and there's going to be multiple towers that you will stand up in order to protect your organization. When it comes to the incident response pieces of it, again, that's a process question that they're going to ask. They have asked us that, and we have written that into our insurance policies as well. They expect for us to respond in a certain period of time, but the only way you can do that is if you have a very strong IR process. Are you detecting quickly? Are you being able to respond quickly? And if you can't demonstrate that I can detect and respond quickly, it's going to be very hard for you to meet those requirements when it comes to how quickly you respond to an incident. So I think the devil is in the details of how you've constructed your program. It's also what carrier you're looking at and what they can offer and provide to you. And it really is, again, a risk-based decision. Are you going to be able to 100% transfer that risk to a policy? No. So that some of that is going to be your organization having to choose how much of that risk are we going to incur. There's a portion that we can push to that policy, but it won't be 100%. So it's just another tool in your toolbox, if you ask me.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. And please keep the questions questions coming where Ben and I are tag teaming, watching the Q&A in the chat as well. And I just want to tell, before we get to the personal part, I want to tell a personal story. So it was several years ago at a company I used to work for, and I got an email, and it had the brown and yellow and red line from UPS. It was very brown, right? Because they're brown. And hey, there's a package for you to pick up. Click here, you know, and it didn't say click here because I'm always leery of click here to sign for this package, right? You can sign electronically for the package that is being delivered to your office. Okay. It was addressed to me at the company for a picture. So for a receipt. And I was expecting something. Clicked on the link. Wham. What it was a test that my company was doing, and I failed it because I clicked on the link. And it was like, well, wait, I am expecting something. But then I had to go, and you know what? You know, I think of myself as being very savvy, but guess what I had to do? I had to go through the training, because if you missed one, then the company said, okay, apparently you need to have a little bit of training. And so I had to sign up and I had to watch a video, and they talked about it. And so, you know, for some people, they're like, oh my gosh, and it's so intense, but it's okay. That's, you know, they were doing that on purpose to train me. And so I went through the training, and then the next time I saw something come through, I was like, nuh-uh, I am not doing that. So, I mean, everyone can make a mistake, but this is why it is so important that we understand this, because we can be compromising our systems at work through a personal thing. And so, speaking of personal, now we're going to get into something that I know is going to make these ladies crazy, right? So, I love devices. And I'm not going to say her name, because anytime I have in casual conversation, something happens in my house. I turn a faucet on. Yep, have a faucet. I know Patrice like, oh, girl, please, you have a faucet. I have the devices. We have the things and the stuff and all the things that are so cool, right? It's the Internet of Things. What should we be sweating? Because, you know, there are such conveniences, and I have to say, I just kind of love them. But, you know, we're thinking about garage door openers, front doors, and you know, hey, you can, there was a group that, oh, join this group on Ring. And so we can all come together. And I was like, yeah, I'm not joining any groups. I know Alexa sidewalk, that came up. So what should we be sweating about this? I mean, so what should we sweat, and why should we sweat it? So I am going to go first to Patrice, because, and I'm going first to her because I have said something before and she was like, girl.
Yes. Hey, I get it. I mean, I struggle when I look on Amazon deals, like the last couple of days, and everything that was a your favorite Alexa thing was all on sale, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I actually thought about you. I'm like, I wonder how many of these things Linda bought. But it's a struggle. Yeah, I'm going to be real. Like, you know, much like the ransomware conversation, there can be clean cut. You have people who are like, no, you wouldn't do it, right? No, don't make your house a smart house. But here's the thing, convenience, you have to kind of, much like social media, you have to figure out what is worth it. And if you're going to do it, then how do you best protect it, right? So if you're going to have, for example, smart devices, then have them, but segment them on your router, right? Segmentation is important. It's kind of the new thing with as much of Internet of Things that are there. You know, we have segmentation for our smart devices. We have, you know, a section for only our computer information devices. And then we have one that like are for guests and stuff. So they're never touching our things, right? They're never in our systems. And then, you know, I think the biggest thing too is if you're going to go down the dark side because they have cookies and smart devices, then, you know, make sure that you just do your research, right? Make sure it's a reputable company. Make sure that if you hear there is a question of them being attacked or the integrity being questioned, go change your device passwords, go, revisit your router, and change not just the password on your device, but change the password of the things that it's connecting to regularly too. I think it's important to always understand that with everything comes a risk, but much like, I would say much like driving, right? I mean, it's a privilege, it's convenient, it's awesome, but we still have to consider the rules of the road. We still have to consider protecting ourselves when we're driving, right? We're not just inviting people in to just picking up these hitchhikers and, because they have a trusted, they're in a suit, I mean, you have to kind of be careful with your home for lots of reasons, much like you do with your work. But home is home, right? That's where our children are. That's where we relax. That's where we should feel the safest. So I really feel like if you're gonna go down the path of I just can't help myself, because it's good stuff. And I'm the same way. I mean, I bought a fridge just specifically, I don't want the fridge to tell me when I need milk. One, I don't need that judgment from something that is plugged in. And two, and so I thought I did good research on the fridge, and then sure enough, I plug in the fridge, and all of a sudden a hotspot comes off of it, and it's like what the heck? I didn't buy this. Everything's smart, Our cars are smart, they're computers. They don't even, I think the danger nowadays is that you have these things that they seem so simple, but the complicated ones and zeros behind it and what it's connecting to, we don't even know what's happening, right? So of course I was going through the thing. I'm like, how do I disable this? But I get it. I have a husband who loves technology, and so and I love technology too. And I have 4 kids, so I'm never gonna be and I wouldn't want to, right? So we just have to find the balance. And I think that's the key thing, balancing it, pros and cons of it, and just and protect your stuff and figuring out where do you need to put the things that you need to stay safe, and separate that from the things that you may not feel as needing to do that. So
that's awesome. And I think that's really important to emphasize is segmentation of devices. So, and I want to continue to follow up on this. So, I'm going to go to you, Nicole, and then I have a question for you, Meredith. So, Nicole, can you speak about this Alexa sidewalk? Because I remember when we were first talking about it, and I was like, Alexa sidewalk, and I'm immediately texting my husband, did you know about this sidewalk? And what is this? So, talk to us about what that is, because I'm betting you, as technically savvy as I consider us to be in this house, I didn't know anything about an Alexa sidewalk.
So yeah, it's interesting. And actually my mother sends me a message and says, what is this? Should I disable this? And I didn't even know about it. And, we had till I forget, June something, I think it was 8th or something, to disable. Otherwise it would be on. So really what it is, it's kind of like a bandwidth sharing network. And there's a whole white paper on it that talks about the security and privacy, but there's still a lot of speculation on how secure it really is. My advice is to disable it. It's still kind of new, there's still not a ton of information. And if you're not, I don't have problems with my internet, right? What it basically is saying, if your internet goes down, it'll help pull from, this network in your neighborhood, and it'll just help keep your devices up, basically keep them available. Well, let's be real. Do we need to have all these devices on all the time? No. If we're gone and our Ring goes down or a camera inside goes down, yeah, we use those as security to monitor when we're gone. But it's not going to hurt us if the internet goes down and ours goes down. And normally, if mine goes down, my neighbor's is down too, right? So if you think about that, so it's basically summarizing shared network that's helping all these devices work together better, pulling from your neighborhood and it supposedly helped things work bigger, faster, smarter, right? And so that's a selling point to some people. Oh, if this is faster and better, yeah, let's do that. But I'm not really seeing any benefits or anything that, you know, we can't live without Alexa or any of those devices for a certain amount of time if the internet's down.
Sorry, just
Oh,
so if on cue, you heard your
yeah.
if on cue, that was amazing. And so and scary. And scary, right? So a question that came in, and I saw another comment we'll get to, was so Meredith, and then everybody else jump in here too. What are your thoughts on the Ring doorbell? So there's Ring and Nest, and there's some other ones, but what are your thoughts on the Ring doorbell?
You know, this is one where I'm torn, because it's back to the whole, the balance of the convenience versus the possible security concerns that you may have. And I'm gonna be honest, I have a Ring doorbell in my house. My husband and I travel a lot, and non-pandemic, when we're outside of the pandemic. And so being able to monitor who's coming up to our home and things like that is very important to us. So I can't say that I'm a strong a dissenting opinion there around whether people should leverage those or not. However, I think Shatrice came up with a great suggestion before around the fact that you should be looking at segmentation of how do you actually put these things into their own spaces, so they're not, if they're ever penetrated for whatever reason, they can't get to some of your personal crown jewels. Just like we talked about corporate crown jewels, you have personal crown jewels that they can't get to. And so I think taking all the necessary measures you would have to take in order to make sure that the resulting data, because those videos go somewhere, right? So some folks, depending on the program or the plan that you have, you may be able to store them for up to a year, that kind of thing. Like, so there's access that people could have to those. Not only that, but also the data that you actually provide, and even to just have the plan, your credit card numbers, things like that. You know, so all of that is being stored somewhere. So ensure that you're enacting all the necessary controls in order for that to be safe. But I can't say that I would tell people not to do it, because I have them in my house as well. And the same thing, like I see something on here, the Ring alarm system, doorbells, Ring floodlights, entire system. Like, honestly, I have that outside of my garage. I want to see who's walking on the side of my house. And so it's a convenience thing for us. We just have to take the necessary precautions to protect ourselves.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah,
Linda,
and I'm sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I would just add to that. I mean, you're connecting this stuff to your home network. You know, it's important to make sure your home network has, you know, WPA2 encrypted. Make sure that, you know, if you're going to type in your information into the Ring, make sure if it's going to a website, make sure it says HTTPS before it, to make sure it's all, you know, encrypted there. Like the basics, right? Passwords. Don't change the default password. Make it, you know, make it hard to guess. Make sure it's connected to a secure fashion. And also, this is something that's, you know, a little more technical to your average user, but make sure you're aware of the software updates that it's pushing out, and making sure you're not just letting it, just a piece of hardware, just letting it ride, because there are security vulnerabilities, and Ring does fix them, right? As do everybody else. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, I would actually say that I'm in the same boat as Meredith. I mean, you know, I have 4 kids. They're in and out of the house all the time. You know, before COVID, I traveled a lot. My husband traveled a lot. I have 2 teenage girls that are very into boys. And so, you know, there's things that we have to put into that perspective. But, you know, absolutely, when you heard around Christmas time, the Ring, you know, was one of the ones where people got hacked into. And, you know, somebody had, I think, an indoor Ring system or whatnot that was inside a kid's bed, you know, their kid's bedroom. The background of that, though, was they never changed the password. And so, I mean, if that happened, that would not have happened if they had done those things. And, you know, anywhere where it's possible, you know, 2-factor authentication, tri-factor authentication, you know, I mean, those things, if you have the capability on your social media accounts, on your home security accounts, to do that, always do that. That way, you know, no one's getting into it without at least you getting triggered that somebody's getting into it. And then you can stop it at a certain point and go back and figure out what happened. So I think it's really important to, you know, but also trust the company, right? Before I bought Ring, I researched the company, like where are they from? What security issues have they been? Also, how honest have they been about security issues, right? Because if they're the ones that are coming out and then you saying, hey, we had an issue, we're fixing it, that kind of thing, I will go with the company that does that than a company who I find that the employee told the media or that, because if they don't have the processes in place internally to interact with their external customer base honestly and transparently, then that's actually a larger red flag than a company that has had things, because this is going to happen even to the best of us, but they handle it and they have a plan in place and they handle it with transparency and honesty. And I feel like, just like we are all humans, people are going to mess up and they own it and we deal with it and we move on. And that applies most certainly to cyber incidences, that applies to these kind of mistakes. So I think it's important when we go and you look at those things, use the tools, much like Ben said, HTTPS, check on the things, and also be aware what your background is, right? I mean, one of the things with Ring you'll see is like, don't have it on recording when you're home right by the door, right? Like, don't always have it always on no matter what, or if you have people come in, or if you recognize that this is a sensitive time or sensitive issue or whatever, there's no need. I have Comcast in-home kind of things, right? But I lock that. I like, as soon when we're gone, we have it up. When we're in the home, we're not going to have video going. There's no reason to do that, right? But some people don't think, okay, I want to turn it off. And so even segmentation for what you're using it for is, on your router and that things is important, but also segmentation of when you really need it, right? And when you need to use it to just further protect, to Meredith's point, it's being stored somewhere. So how much of that do you really want stored, right? And I think that's something to consider too.
And get ourselves beyond passwords too. I think that, we rely on the normal 8-character passwords that are pretty weak in most instances. If the organization, the company, application gives you the ability to do passphrases, longer passwords, take advantage of every single character that they give you the ability to leverage, because that makes it more complex. So even if you don't have MFA available, if they allow you 15 characters, 16 characters, do a full passphrase. It's going to be very difficult for somebody to really figure that out. So make it as complex as possible. Change your passwords. I mean, this is basic hygiene that I've seen my own mom, God bless her, when she was still living, and she would just like use the same password for everything and it would be forever. And I would tell her, change your password like you change your underwear. Hopefully you change it every day. Not saying you have to change your password every day, but be on some level of a frequency where after a while, this password gets stale, old, and funky, and we need to go to a new one, and let's change it and get to a new one. So I have made it a habit in my household that we change our passwords on a quarterly basis. So quarterly, we update all of our passwords, and we have ways to monitor and manage that. Or if we don't update them, we ensure we have MFA in place where we can actually have that second layer of protection.
And there's, as you were saying, there's so many password managers out there now. I saw Shatrice saying that you don't have to remember all these passwords. That's why you have these apps, you can use them. Literally, it's like a click of the button half the time. Once you enter, there's a little setup. So I think using those, and Dave asked about MFA. MFA is, it can be annoying. I mean, how many times do you go to log in and it's like, oh wait, it's got to send you a code, and then how fast does the code get to me? But it is, if there's MFA, use it. And that is a key, because for those of you that don't know, basically that's a second factor, right, of protection. So it's not only your password, but it's also the token. So you have to have both of those to get in. And so it reduces hacking or anything that can go in. The other thing I wanted to add on is when you talked about doing your homework, Shatrice, that's something we talk about from a vendor risk assessment standpoint, which we do for companies. But I've started doing this in my own personal life, just doing a quick assessment on these companies, and do they encrypt data? Is their TLS 1.2 right? What's the level of encryption? Is it strong? Those kind of things. And you can do that pretty quickly and research and do your homework on a company and, check 10 things out to find out, okay, versus now I'm going to go with A versus B because the security controls in place.
So Nicole, in the chat, we have a question, and it looks like Shatrice Patrice put something in the chat, pcmag.com, but a recommendation for password managers, because of course there was the question, can password managers be hacked? And of course, I think we know that everything can be hacked, right? But is there a recommendation that you would have, Nicole, for a preferred password manager?
1Password is a good one. Shatrice, do you know other ones? Because I know that's we use that a lot for corporate.
Yeah, I mean, I know all the ones on the PC.com that I just put in there, but LastPass is a really good one.
Oh, LastPass.
LastPass is great for it's good for corporate. I think they have a corporate thing, but LastPass was something that was recommended to me by some DoD experts, just because they have family vaults. And so if you have a family, because you're thinking like, or you have, elderly parents and stuff, and you're wanting to make sure they can have their segmented too, right? So you're not like everybody sees everybody's passwords, but as long as you as the core person, and other password managers do the similar things too. So, I would just say, like, find something that works for you. For me, with 4 kids who are online all the time and always forgetting their passwords, and also, it does have a great thing where it just says create a password, and it creates it and automatically saves it. So they're not having to do a lot of extra work. I think those are the kind of password managers you want to find, that the ease of use. So if you're gonna kind of keep it somewhere, do that. And then, I know that actually I think almost all of the ones that in that PC one is good, in the sense that it some point any of them have had issues, they've been very upfront about that very quickly. And I think, again, that honesty component, right? Because anybody can get hacked, but I would say having a good password manager and using the password manager, not just putting your same password in for all your things in the password manager, but like go through it. And and I like Meredith's, every quarter, one of the triggers for me, and I don't know anybody else on the call, is when my job at the state, we have to renew our passwords every 90 days. So I'll start getting 10 days out, hey, it's time to change your password, it's time to change your password. That's my personal trigger for, hey, it's time to change my password at home. So I'm getting something externally poking at me for work, but I also use that as like, all right, I need to send a message to kids and stuff to say, hey, if you don't, to Mara's point, if you don't have factor, or if, even with those, if it's been there for a while, then let's change passwords. And I don't, so many people have so many things, so don't overwhelm yourself, because it can be overwhelming. Even if it's like, every quarter you change the top 5 things you use, or the most critical, like, your chart for healthcare or things like that, right? I mean, so kind of chunk it up and do it that way. If you follow us on IN Cyber and on our Twitter account, like, we'll even throw out there, hey, it's like clean your house day, so go change 2 passwords, right? So I think it's about like not seeing, oh my gosh, how many of us have, like, I have hundreds of accounts, right? And I know when I did my complete clean, I took that down some, but I'm sure it's been a few years when I did the, like, had to go through, and if you don't use it, get rid of it, delete your profile, that kind of thing. But I think those are things that people can do and trigger. But I love Meredith's, the quarterly thing's good.
And I've used TrueKey from McAfee. So if you if you have like services like McAfee, sometimes they'll have bundled in some password managers. Again, it's a personal preference for you. They all generally do the same things. You have the auto-generated passwords. The one thing I like about TrueKey, number one, is bundled into everything else I have, but it also captures, even when I'm setting up new accounts and I'm using a browser. So when I'm in the browser and I'm setting up a new account, it can detect, like, this is a new account. We don't see this in your password list. We'll grab all of that information, we'll plop it in, and then therefore you go about your business. So for those, you can also set up auto logins as well. So for some sites I go to, I wanted to automatically grab my login and password and just populate. I don't do that for everything. But for the ones that I use the most, I do set that up. And I use it for my entire family. So I think look at some of the bundles that you may already have access to some password managers, and you might not even be aware that they're available to you.
And I want to add something here before I go to the next question. And I was recently traveling, and all of a sudden something popped up on my phone. people pay attention to what, sometimes you need to pay attention to what your phone tells you. And what popped up on my phone, I am walking through a casino in Vegas and I feel, and I look down and there's a notification that said, your password have appeared in a data leak. You need to go to your settings and you need to fix it. When you see that, go to your settings because you need to fix it. That's serious. And so I'm just going to tell you, we're iOS junkies in my house. So I'm going to tell you, if you go to settings on your phone and then you scroll down to passwords, then you will see it may come up and have security recommendations, and it'll have that exclamation point. And then there's a setting that says detect compromised passwords, and then it'll come up and say you should change it, or it appeared in a data leak, or the other thing I've seen is it's too similar to other passwords, you need to change it. So do that. And I know it is a hassle, but you know it's kind of like looking at the difference of, if I do the hassle now and address the hassle, yeah, it's a hassle, but I protect my data, versus if I continue to ignore it, then the next thing you know, I go to pay for something and I can't pay for anything because my money's gone. I had a situation when I was traveling in Brazil several years ago where I checked out of a hotel, got on a plane, and in that time span of an hour and 45 minutes, my credit card was shut down by my company. Good thing, because someone took that credit card information and purchased $2,000 worth of stereo equipment, and they closed my credit card down before I even got back in the United States, right? But I mean, that's what the corporation is doing. Personally, you may not have somebody enlisted to do that. So pay attention to those things. However you do it for an Android or whatever device you're using, pay attention when you get those notifications. And so I want to make sure there's something really important I want to end with here in this conversation, but I do want to bring this up. We are Zooming and Teamsing more than ever. And yeah, we're doing it for work, right? And so great, you're doing it for work and everything's hunky-dory, but you have what, most of you, I think you've talked about how you have, Satrice has 4 teenagers, many of you have kiddos that are on different machines in your house, and you're attending your church, right? Still virtual church, your book clubs. Somebody the other day posted on Facebook they were attending a master class. So when we're thinking about Zooms and Teams, what are, if you can kind of give us very quick tips here with the time we have left, what are some things that you could counsel on what you should be doing before you Zoom and Teams individually? And Meredith, you're off mute. We'll start with you.
Well, the first thing that you can do is just these companies and these applications have the ability for you to set passwords onto your actual Zoom account so that that Zoom meeting can be password protected. Leverage that. And make sure that your attendees have those particular passwords for that particular session. It will help you prevent some of the, Zoom bombing that we saw earlier in these cycles where people were just showing up into meetings and creating havoc in those meetings. So that's a very simple thing that you can do. I think the other thing is, and this may seem really benign for most people, but we ran into this as we started to get more involved with the team's environment, is be mindful of what's behind you. Be mindful of what's in your environment when you're on a screen. So most of these applications, or both of them, since we're talking specifically about Zoom and Teams, give you the ability to create backgrounds. Nicole has a nice background there, so we can't really see what's going on behind her. Be mindful of that, because sometimes, depending on how your office setup is, you may have sensitive information that can be seen on the screen that you don't want people to be able to see, depending on your configuration. So think about those, I guess, really, like I said, simple things. It's not that difficult. This is going to be our life moving forward. If we ever think that we're going to go away from this virtualness that we have now, courtesy of the pandemic, we're sadly mistaken. This is going to be a part of our life. Yes, it's going to be hybrid. Yes, we might get back to normal to certain extents, but I think we have created a fondness of the accessibility of these things when we have these virtual environments. So basic things: pay attention to your background. Use the passwords that are set there. There are a ton of controls that you can actually activate for both of these different platforms. Leverage them.
other tips? Nicole?
Yeah, so just a couple and it's, meetings like this are kind of hard, but when you have a meeting, you know who you invited, you know who should be on your call. So when you look and you see Bob and you're like, who's Bob? So just say, Bob, can you tell me what your role is on this call? And, it may be somebody, I actually had somebody that they were using their Zoom was broken, or their computer, and they were using someone else's, and they just didn't get a chance to change the name. So, but make sure you know who your participants are. Don't post your meetings on social media or public forums unless you have to. But even if it's a Facebook or private group, you can do private groups and stuff, but just don't put that on public places. And then just, a tip is when you do screen sharing, this is key for us. We have a lot of stuff open. I may be working on 4 or 5 clients at one time. I have to be careful to share one screen so I don't share other sensitive information with other kinds of things like that. There's also the admit button, so you can see who you admit, and you do have to turn that on, but you can click, to admit the people instead of they just automatically join.
Yeah, and add to the really great advice both ladies shared. Very similar to what you learned for the physical security at work, right? Not having things out on your desk, understanding that if you make sure that you're comfortable in the background. Like I have a really beautiful bookcase back there, but I've totally screenshotted to make sure. I don't ever use anything on my books for passwords or anything like that. So it's not like, but a lot of people put they'll have their calendars in the background, right? And so and you have this big line vacation in Florida, and you're like, okay, well, I know they're not going to be there. Or they'll have bills on the background for some reason or whatever. So I think always being cognizant, to kind of hone in on Mara's point of look at your background, to look at are you comfortable with the pictures you're sharing in the background? Are you comfortable with, the books you're sharing if you're going to go that route? If not, then, I most certainly, having a basic background is also important. Pay attention. I know it sounds silly, but pay attention to what technology you're showing too, right? Even with taking pictures, right? You can be here, but then don't have your laptop, and you can see what kind of laptop it is. Don't have your phone out, and you can see what you're doing there. If you have smart technology on you and you don't want to share that, then take off your Apple Watch, take off your Garmin watch, those kind of things when you're trying to focus in and see what am I giving away into my personal life? What window, what are they looking at in that window? Much like you put blinds up in certain parts of your house, and other parts you're like, they're only going to see a plant, right? You have to consider what you're allowing people, because as much as good people are looking in, bad people are looking in too. And I think the other thing that we've learned in the long run, to the confidentiality, but just the appropriateness, is people are comfortable in their homes, but I think they'll continue to be comfortable in their spaces at work. So if you're be wary of who's beside you, and also working remotely, especially as people even going back to an office are going to be dealing with open work concepts and, flow in and out kind of things for spacing. I had my kid one day, I was just doing work, and my kid is on a Zoom call, except somebody, of course, on the other side, some kid didn't have their mute button on, and their parents were talking about super critical information and confidential information that if I was a bad actor, I'd be writing it down, including part of a social security number, right? So, so always pay attention to the layers of what you're listening to. If you're on a confidential call, be alone. Make sure you tell people around you, I can't have stuff on, right? I love my daughter, but she walks around and talks to her friend. I had to have a conversation early on in the pandemic. You can't do that. You have to go in your room and talk to your friends on speaker, because if you can hear them, they can hear you, which means they can hear me when you're walking by my office and I'm on meetings, right? So I think as we go through this hybrid model and thing like that, just continuously being cognizant of what is being heard on the other side, and learning from those lessons. So.
That is awesome. And I wanted to add to that, the one thing that I remember you saying on a call is watch having your kiddos come and sit on your lap. And I have seen that happen so often, where somebody's like, oh, look at my kiddo. And they're just sitting on the lap and they're like, yeah, I'm sitting here playing my game. And then and I'm like, okay, so no, you're in a big meeting. So no, don't do that. We only have a couple minutes left. So here's something I think is really important. Number one, if somebody could answer quickly, and I'm just going to open this. What do you do when you think that you've been hacked? What do you do when you've suffered a personal cybersecurity attack, like a compromised password or a retail account? What is the first thing you should do? And is there a resource you can refer to? And I'll just open that up to any of our panelists.
Change password and verify, and then maybe change it again.
And maybe even report to the credit card companies, call them, your bank, because you never know what they got or how far it went.
Yeah.
And then this is another one. Go to the credit agencies and lock your accounts, lock your files. I keep all of mine locked. You can't get any credit in my name without it alerting me, and it's going to deny it. And sometimes I forget myself, and then it denies me, so I have to go back and change that. But you can put freezes and you can put locks on your accounts to keep your credit file from being accessed. So I think that's one thing. Always make sure you have that, especially if you've been breached. And then also there's an opportunity for you to sign up again for companies that can do this level of monitoring for you. Anything that my bank ever offers, if they say we'll give you a text update if we see something funky going on your account, I'm signing up for it because I want to get all the alerts that I possibly can beforehand before something becomes a problem. So if you get in a situation where the problem has already happened, go back and try to see if some of those second, third, fourth, fifth alerts and factors are available. Activate them because that'll put you in a better position in the future once you get beyond this particular incident.
And Linda, and for the panelists and attendees, the Attorney General actually has a free identity theft protection toolkit that allows you in one place to do that. There are people who you have to pay money to do that, but our Attorney General, Indiana is one of the very few states that actually have that, or I think was the first state to actually do that as a service to Indiana citizens. So I'll put that in our chat.
And Ben also put in the chat ready.gov for how to protect yourself and what to do if you've been breached on a personal level. Please check these things out because, we all have loved ones and some of those are elderly. And I consider myself to be such a savvy person. I have been getting email about Norton antivirus. I've been getting that in a personal email. And I know it's a hack. But now what I do and practice all the time, if I get an email or something and I'm not sure, I just go to the website. If I get something from Amazon that says, oh, you need this, or Apple or PayPal or Netflix, or I don't click on the link in the email, even if I know for an absolute, I don't know for an absolute certainty. If I don't know, I'm going to apple.com. I'm going to paypal.com. I'm going to netflix.com. So be so careful about clicking on links and share these resources. Sit down with your grandparents, your parents, and share with them information to keep them safe. Don't just install something in their home and then leave it for them to manage because, in some cases, maybe they're savvy, in some cases they're not. So make sure that you're having regular sessions with your kids, your family, your aunties, to make sure that they are cyber safe. With the last couple of minutes, yes.
Can I add this one thing in?
Yes.
Just as a reminder, the IRS will never call you asking you to divulge information over the phone. Governmental agencies won't call you. So when those scams are happening and you get those phone calls, or your loved ones are elderly, they're getting scammed at an enormous rate at this point because they believe it. They're not going to call the police. They're not going to arrest you. They're not going to do any of those. And I'm just the crazy person who I like to talk to these people because I kind of egg them on and just kind of give them hell. But make sure that you are remembering those things. They will never contact you that way. I had one instance where Microsoft contacted me because they detected that there was anomalies happening on my computer. First, Microsoft is not monitoring your computer, so therefore they cannot detect those anomalies. So just be mindful of those calls that seem kind of crazy. If they sound off the wall, they probably are, and they're not legitimate. Make sure you tell your family that.
Awesome, awesome. And I will ask one last question. I know we're right over time by 1 minute, but can someone say, hey, if you get a call about COVID-19, because I do know that that has happened about, oh, you need to get the COVID-19 thing, that there is a scam going out there. What should, especially targeted towards elderly again, what should people do if they get that COVID-19 call and they haven't registered for something?
So go to a .gov website. I mean, that's a simple, like if you're not sure, there's nothing that is going to be something you have to deal with right then. So if you get a call, okay, I'll go check on it, and go to your health department.gov website, go to the CDC.gov website, go there. And again, never trust and always verify. So, and those calls are not happening. That are legit, right? So if you're getting those calls, to Mary's point, it's 99% a scam. So, and even if it isn't for that 0.01%, you're going to find that very quickly on top of those websites. So, because if they're doing phone calls, it's going to be at the top of the website. So always go to a .gov website.
Thank you so much. We could keep going. There's so much here, right? But again, what did you say? Trust and verify, right? So do that. Disable your Alexa sidewalk, right? Be careful and cognizant of what you have going on. And it's funny, just as we were speaking, it's like I'm queuing this up. I have software on my phone that just notified me of a spam risk. So do those things, protect yourself, follow these great leaders on LinkedIn and read what they're posting, because you can learn from that, and check out that AG site and these other sites shared. So thank you so much for your time. We look forward to seeing you again at a future Executive Women's Forum. Thank you so much, Meredith, Catrice, Nicole. You're awesome. Teach us. We don't want a cyber stink, right? So thank you so much. Let's all practice not being cyber stinky and have a fantastic day.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you.